The one thing that I remember about Sybil is she was so fun. I mean, I'm sure that's what Don Harrington saw in her too, because she'd been a dancer and she just had a wonderful, charming personality. She was friends with the most important people in the world. She was in the gossip columns in New York. The Duke and Duchess of Windsor were good friends. They'd have dinner. All movie stars knew her. I asked her about Elizabeth Taylor's eyes. Were they really violet? She said, oh yeah, I had lunch with her last month. And so she had connections that made her life so fun.
She started calling me Willie when she realized that I would look her in the face and disagree with her. And not everybody would do that. And she'd say, now, little Willie, you don't want to start this thing. But it was a term of endearment and not antagonism. She had really close relationships with my mother and father, and that transcended the time between our ages. But it was a compliment to me that she'd stick with Willie, and I'd been known as Willie in high school.
An art dealer from Europe came with a whole bunch of impressionistic paintings, and somebody had backed out of buying them, and the guy was very upset. He spent the night at that house, and they drank that night, and Don Harrington got this guy all rolling and finally said, I'll buy them all for I don't know how many $1 million. The guy woke up the next day and realized he'd sold them way too cheap. Well, this was the basis for their art collection, and she had one of the finest art collections in the world that got started that one night. So things that went on at that house are amazing. Movie stars visited there, and she wanted to keep that house the way it was. So her memories would live on.
She did not live in Amarillo, you know, all of her life in terms of spending time at other places. And she had a place in New York because she was certainly, in fact, the largest patron to the Met. And then she also had a place in Scottsdale and spent time there. And then she had moved out of the Harrington mansion, you know, years prior, and had a little house over on Russ Street, actually, that backed up to the Bivens' backyard, and lived there until her last days.
She was not shy at all. She was fun, funny, witty, really very witty, and yet some people have said that if she didn't like you, she forget about yourself. Well, I don't think that's true. I think Sybil might come and go in society matters, but she would rather do something to expand the arts and expand a relationship for social purposes with people.
Sybil realized that for the arts to operate, you needed a critical mass. You needed a lot. You couldn't just do a little bit. And the best example, the Metropolitan Opera in New York, the leading thing in the world, she was the biggest donor to it. She loved that. She brought that same spirit to the arts in Amarillo and said, if we're going to do it, if we're going to do the Nutcracker, it's going to be the best in the United States. If we're going to have all these art facilities, they need to be the very best. And I'll give the money to make sure it happens.